Representatives, we have created as a body over a century 414 boards and commissions, and the governor's office is involved in appointing people to serve on 374 of those. That's 3,500 people. The vast majority of those 3,500 people are volunteers. Of those 374, 340 have no party requirement at all. It does not matter what political party you belong to serve on that board. Nobody checks, nobody asks. You are simply chosen for your qualifications. The goal on those boards and commissions, as with all boards and commissions, is simply to get the best people to serve on those boards and commissions, and it really works quite well. I think some of you will know that in the recent history, we have started removing partisan limitations on some of these boards. And I would mention two pretty significant boards, the Transportation Board and the Board of Regents. Used to be partisan requirements on those. They no longer have those. And we appoint people because of their qualifications and their interest and ability to serve, and it works very well. Now, I would like to speak to you briefly from my professional background and not necessarily as a representative of any particular party on one side or the other. In my day job, one of my roles is to serve as the Executive Secretary of the Utah Health Data Committee. I have to keep that filled with 15 volunteers. Every one of those 15 positions has specific requirements. One of those is a representative of the Utah Medical Association. Another one of those is a representative of Utah Small Business. And I think many of you have served on some of these boards. And as you will know, that the work of these boards is rarely related to what parties do. It's rarely related to the Utah GOP or the Utah Democratic Party. It's rarely, if ever, related to the work of parties. We need experts to serve on those boards. We do not need people coming to the boards who are going to vote as for example, a Democrat physician or a Republican physician. While there are such things, party matters a lot less than your qualifications. Of the boards that we are considering in this bill, we're considering taking 29 of those boards and moving them from having a partisan requirement to having a nonpartisan balance. Many of these boards' requirements date back to the 1950s or 60s or even longer ago and are simply not relevant in today's environment. Now, there's no question that diversity is important. Absolutely, boards and commissions function best when we have diversity of opinions, we have diversity of backgrounds. But I would ask you to consider what kind of diversity matters. Does it matter which primary you voted in last spring? Does that matter? Or does it matter where you live, your geography? Does it matter your gender? Maybe we want more women on some of these boards. Maybe we want people who represent racial minorities. Maybe we want people who have experience in a particular industry or people who have experience in a particular occupation or profession. Diversity is critical, and it's important that we get the right qualifications and the right balance on all of these boards and commissions. But as you know, you can change your party at a moment's notice. You could walk down right now, Lieutenant Governor's office, and change your party. Nothing stops you from doing that. So if your party matters so much, why should people be allowed to change their party? We've had occasions where people have had to change their party in order to get considered for a volunteer position. And I think that's unfair and unwise. If we get rid of the partisan requirement, it will allow us to more able to be focused on the true types of diversity that we want, geography, gender, minority, etc., which are much more desirable.
Discussion to the bill. Representative Peterson, Jeremy Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute.
Motion is to substitute. That motion is in order. Would you like to speak to it?
Yes, I'd move substitute number 3 in my name. What this bill speaks to is the power of our governor to appoint. And that's a power that we have the ability to check and balance here within this body. To our governor's credit, he's been very fair in many of his appointments, and he's been very even-handed, but we don't necessarily know that that will be the case moving forward in time for any future governor. And previous legislatures have found it in their interest to check this power by requiring partisan appointments in these commissions and boards. And as a member of the supermajority, I can tell you that it's awesome. You can do a lot of things being a member of the supermajority. If you haven't had an opportunity I suggest you try it sometime. But let me give you an example of some things that have been done through a supermajority that might or that ought not to have been done. About a year ago, I traveled to Hungary and visited their capital, Budapest. And you might recall that Hungary was a country behind the Iron Curtain being ruled by Soviet overlords. Back at the end of the Cold War, freedom fighters and freedom-loving people in their country rose up and expelled the Russians from their country. Well, fast forward 30 years later, these freedom fighters now run their country, and they're in charge. They're very conservative ideology. They erected a monument of Ronald Reagan in Freedom Square, and just recently, within the past several years, they obtained a supermajority in their parliament. And with that supermajority, they actually modified their constitution to neuter the influence that the minority party had in state affairs. And so, as the bill is currently written, I know that for our minority party, this bill looks like a free trip to the veterinarian. So the substitute that I have proposes several things. It withdraws some of our more politicized boards and commissions from the bill. So let me read you the list. It removes the Air Quality Board, the Water Quality Board, the Alcohol Beverage Control Board, the Public Service Commission, and also eliminates the Commission on Service and Volunteerism. And along with that, it also requires that the person interviewing people for the remaining boards and commissions that remain in the bill, that they cannot ask questions about partisanship and about party affiliation. And so, Mr. Speaker, with that, that is the substitute.
Thank you. Motion before us is a motion to substitute. The motion is to move third substitute, HB11. Let me go to Representative Thurston, the maker of the sponsor of the bill.
Yeah, so I think you can all appreciate that I would like the bill to stay the way it is. That having been said, I presume that I'm not the only one who has received emails, texts, phone calls, etc. And I understand that some of you have constituents who have strong feelings about this. I would feel a lot better if the Public Service Commission were not on this list. I will draw your attention to that specific one and let the body decide. Public Service Commission, the reason why I have a problem with putting that one on the list is that the Public Service Commission is essentially a panel of judges. They spend virtually all of their time in hearings, and I don't think it's a good idea for a panel of judges to be representing partisan issues. With that said, I will leave it up to the body to decide if you prefer Representative Peterson's, my good colleague from the north, from Weber County, my good colleague from Weber County, with his list, or if you'd prefer my list. In reality, I would be fine with the bill either way because it's a step in the right direction. And of course, there's always another opportunity.
Thank you. The discussion to the motion to substitute. The motion to substitute is to move third substitute, House Bill 11. Discussion to that motion. Representative Briscoe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am supporting this motion to substitute. I do appreciate the commissions and boards that are being removed with this substitute. I do want to give one observation. Someone went to great length to go into all the other boards on this list and commissions and say, in appointing people to this board, you cannot even try or look at political affiliation. And it's well intended. There's good intention. I don't believe it solves the problem. So I commend the representatives who placed in this substitute the language which says you can't look at political affiliation. That's not enough. If we just put people if we say, oh, I need to put people on this committee, and I'm going to put people on this committee that are in my group that I hang around with all the time, that doesn't make for strong organizations. And it might be imperfect, But saying that people have to be from different parties sometimes forces us to look at people that we wouldn't normally think about putting on a committee and reaching across some aisles and some barriers that might not be physical but might be mental and otherwise. So I'm supporting this substitute because it takes off some commissions I think should be subbed, but I think that other language doesn't go far enough. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The motion before us is a motion to substitute. It is a motion to move third substitute House Bill 11 under Representative Jeremy Peterson's name. Discussion to that motion. Representative Miles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the sponsor of the substitute yield to a question?
I'll yield, Mr. Speaker.
Well, okay. Proceed.
Thank you. Can you explain what method you use to select the commissions and committees that you chose to exclude from this bill?
Yes. So the governor's office came to us in committee and explained that they're having trouble filling a lot of the vacancies in many of these boards and commissions. But several of these boards and commissions, they have no problem filling. They're in the limelight. They draw a lot of public attention, and so they have people referring themselves, volunteering, wanting to be part of those boards. So so I selected those commissions and boards which seem to have a more political element to them, which is drawing that limelight, to preserve that partisan balance on those commissions, while also recognizing that there's a pragmatism to keeping these other non-politicized boards in the bill so that vacancies can be filled as quickly as possible.
Follow-up question?
Proceed. Will the sponsor yield to a follow-up question of
Yes.
the substitute, or move the substitute? Proceed.
Thank you. So when you say, is that something that you did yourself, or you got input, or
Yes.
are there other similar boards or that might just as well have been on that list that didn't make that list?
There might have been several more, but trying to strike a delicate balance when you've got dozens of boards you're working with, and trying to strike a compromise balance that's palatable to more members of this body, this is what we came up with.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion to the motion to substitute. Motion is to move third substitute House Bill 11 under Representative Jeremy Peterson's name. Representative Christensen.
Mr. Speaker, can I just make a comment? I try to be selective. It's just a flood of things to consider, but we've got these words, P words, political, partisan, petty. Can I give another one? Principled. We passed a bill last year that took this issue on, where we, after 50, 60 years, we found that we had the unintended consequence on one of our legislative management committees. Another P word was proportionality. We had a stalemate. Can you imagine if you had an even number of Supreme Court justices? And we looked at this. So here we come forward to this bill. Why do you have to apologize? The people, why is it okay for this body to have a majority and a minority? Why is it okay for we the people to elect? And again, if it's principled, and if you take the high road and everyone chooses the principles and the values that they want to espouse and advocate and represent, and then all of a sudden, can you imagine having a family gathering and saying, we've got a problem, we're too united as a family, we need to mix it up, and we need someone to be this way and someone to be that way. And I don't want to offend anyone. I think we're naturally, lovingly diversified. I think we love all people. We care about all people. But sometimes it just seems like principles just get lost and they just fade away. And all of a sudden at one level, we're going to have a debate on the state school board, but we interact as the elected representatives of the people. Why would a legislative body represent the will of we the people, we the parents, and then go off and be told mandatorily that they're supposed to somehow interact with another group that can't be? And so I think if we want to surrender to some type of reality that things are petty and they're political and they're personal and they're this and they're that, but I don't think you have to apologize for the people making a conscious, informed decision on what you might call partisan, but if they've chosen to identify with and they want to know, do you stand for this or that? Where do you stand on taxation? Where do you stand on the proper role of government? What do you believe about this? What do you believe about that? And they might have a preference for some of those things, but it can be done in a very fair and balanced way. So maybe proportionality, maybe if there are appointments, we have commissions where sometimes it'll say this many members of the minority, this many members of the majority, but there is a majority and there is a minority, and it's the will of the people. So it goes to all.
State your point, Representative.
The representative is discussing a bill from a previous previous session that is not germane to this bill.
The principle is, that's just a passing comment, Mr. Speaker.
Representative, your point is that you feel that the discussion to the motion to move third substitute is not germane to the bill. I'm going to rule that it's germane, so I rule that it is germane.
Thank you. It speaks to the underlying point, whether it be the third substitute, the first substitute, the bill as originally submitted, or anything that's related thereto going forward. This is a recurring principle, and I thank you for the courtesy. It was hard for me to decide. I thought, I don't want to be misunderstood. I want to be understood that we love all people, and we're so respectful of all of our colleagues in this body. And I, for one, want to thank our minority member for the very stirring prayer this morning, which touched me deeply, and I thank you for that. So I just wanted to emphasize the principle. It has recurring applications in everything we do. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion to the motion? Seeing no further lights, we'll come back to the maker of the motion for summation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a couple other P words. Previous prerogative of legislatures to have this balanced policy in place. In striking a balance of discussion on these boards, I believe that it would be beneficial to maintain the minority's presence on these, even if it's just to help the majority keep its bearings. There is contribution to the discussion that occurs in these forums, whether we agree or disagree. That's up to those bodies to make that decision. But I believe this keeps that discussion healthy and robust, and I hope I can have your support.
Thank you. The motion before us is a motion to substitute. The motion is to move third substitute, House Bill 11. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. No. Rule the motion passes. The bill has been substituted. Further discussion to the bill. Representative Arendt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a bit better bill, but I still strongly oppose it. Debated it. We spent a lot of time on one commission, and then we put it on the 2014 ballot. And what were the results? What did the public say about taking the political diversity out of one commission? Well, by a 60 to 40% margin, the voters rejected that change. And they voted the Tax Commission should retain the requirement that no more than 2 of their 4 members should come from the same political party. Again, the public overwhelmingly rejected what we are trying to do here on just one commission when they got a vote. This bill proposes doing so much more. I urge you to reject this bill and go and remember what the public said to us just barely over 2 years ago, and not make these sweeping changes until we understand the entire picture of each of these important boards. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion. Representative Sandel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm rising in support of this bill. I've served on the Quality Growth Commission, and I would see no reason to have that a partisan commission. I look at the Livestock Commission, and why would we ask various industry members to vet their opinion of whether they were one party or another? We just need to get good people that are willing to serve and spend the time to serve. And a lot of these boards, I feel, have been vetted by the sponsor, and I think this is a good piece of legislation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Further discussion to the bill. Representative Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I really like this bill. I've served on 3 such commissions, and frankly, divisive partisan politics doesn't belong on these boards. We get plenty of that in here, folks. And these boards have responsibilities that they're better able to do, and you're better able to appoint people without worrying about what their political affiliation is. So I totally support this thing and probably clear back to the original bill without eliminating all these people. So that's my 2 bits. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further lights, we're going to go back to the sponsor of the bill for summation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So the current bill as amended is still a great bill. It moves us in the right direction of removing party labels when they're not necessary. As far as being a sweeping change, I would beg to differ. We are now talking about 24 boards out of 414. If you're better than me at math, you know that's just a little over 5%. And we have a long track record of boards and commissions that have no partisan balance. The city councils, local school boards, board of trustees, board of regents. There are lots and lots of them out there. It works much better when we're able to choose the right people for the right reasons and not have them think that they are representing a party or a group of people other than the entire community when they're sitting on these boards and commissions. And so with that in mind, I would urge your support. Let's move this board bill forward and then take a break for lunch.
Thank you. Voting will now be open on 3rd Substitute House Bill 11, State Boards and Commissions Amendments. Seeing all present having voted, voting will now be closed. 3rd Substitute House Bill 11, having received 51 yes votes, 21 no votes, passes this body. We transmit it to the Senate for its consideration.